So life in Guatemala City, it's the city is the center basically of all economic growth in the country. So it's where all the big companies are. It's really where all the money is. It's outside, it's just way more poor. So in the city you have like the nicest things, you got the richest people for the most part, like 99% of the time. Your neighborhoods are spread out, but not really. Like, it's really not a huge city geographically. If, for example, you were to put a U.S. highway into it, you could get across really fast. But the roads there are not as big, so there's a lot of traffic. There's tons of cars. Transportation, either a taxi, but that's expensive, so we would take buses. You'd pay 1 quetzal to get on a bus, a red bus usually, and it's like a 50-seater bus with about 100 to 150 people on it sometimes. And so you get around that way. By the way, 1 quetzal is like 15 cents or so. Everything's really cheap for us, right? For them, they work really hard. Like, their work days could be sometimes 7 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week. But usually, if I find somebody who works only 5 days a week, that's like they've got a good job. So they work as construction workers, building houses. They're constantly building things with brick and mortar, I think you call it, cinder blocks. And a lot of guys working in call centers, both in English and in Spanish. If you could speak in English when you're doing good. So you got call centers from Walmart, from cruise ship companies I've heard of, and companies like that. I want to say like Xerox or HP as well. So they've got a lot of call centers in Guatemala City. Life is pretty loud there. It really is. It's just kind of hectic for the people sometimes. They live simply despite that. Life seems complex here to me. We just have so many things constantly, even though we do live more peacefully, if that makes sense, because there's like really loud music, really loud cars in the city, like I was talking about, violence. So we never carried much, really. I would usually keep 30 quetzales in my pocket. That would be about $4, just so if you do get robbed, you got something to give them. But not much more than that. On a monthly basis, we would get about, I want to say, between 1,000 quetzales and 1,500, depending on if we paid the rent or if the office paid the rent. Houses can vary big time. Like that one area I was telling you about, where all the houses are the same. Our house was teeny tiny because all the rest of the houses are teeny tiny. And you just kind of get used to it. And we didn't have water a lot of the time there. It just kind of didn't come. So we would take showers with buckets. And it gets cold in Guatemala, believe it or not, because it's in the mountains. The elevation of Guatemala City is like 4,000 feet. So if you're in like the city center, then it doesn't get too cold. But if you start going up in like Santa Catarina and Pinula, my last area, my first area, way up there, Piedra Parada, it's really cold. So you wear a jacket at night, I slept with a quilt most of my mission. I really did, because it gets cold, gets chilly at night. Not like to where it's snowing or you can see your breath much. That only happened like 3 times or something like that, but to the point where if you're not wearing something more, you'll get cold because the humidity mixed with the cold, mixed with the wind, just like goes through your bones. It can be really cold sometimes. The weather there, though, honestly, is like perfect. Perfect. It's called the land of the eternal spring in Guatemala because it's always between like 60 and 75 degrees in Guatemala City. It's super nice, very sunny. The clouds are so cool there. It's insane. Like, I could probably go on a trip there and just look at clouds. It's amazing. They're constantly forming constantly changing and moving really fast. And they might move fast here, but you can't tell because they're so high up. But they're like right there. So in my first area, for example, which is just kind of on the outskirts of the city, up in the hills, it would be covered by clouds a lot of the time, so just tons of fog. What else? The neighborhoods are kind of organized as like colonies, so it's not like a grid, it's not like a block. You don't have circles and nice patterns. You've got like dead ends and all kinds of, pretty much think of any kind of organization in a neighborhood and mix it all together and you've got Guatemala. Also, in Guatemala City, there's tons of canyons. So there's bridges that go over them in the city. There's people that build their homes down into them, and that's really common. So those are usually the really poor communities that go down and down and down into these places. And it's really all over the city, like from one end to the other. There's just tons of canyons and little rivers. You can see volcanoes from any point in the city, really. Specifically, el volcán de agua, the volcano of water, which is just huge. I loved looking at it. I don't know. I just love looking at any kind of mountains, but especially those volcanoes in Guatemala are just so pretty. Like, they're really majestic. This one especially is known for being like a perfect cone shape. It's really, really cool, really big. It's not in my mission, so we weren't ever allowed to go to it, but we could look at it all we wanted, so it was fun. The cost of living, usually an apartment per month would cost like between 900 and 1500 quetzales. It really just depended on the neighborhood, because you could literally, the difference in economic status could be really drastic, literally from like one spot to another spot 10 feet over. You could get somebody living in a shack of sticks, literally, to somebody living in a mansion right next door and doing like really well, as if they were living in the United States. That was something that was very unique. The cost of living for that reason varies a lot. Also in neighborhoods, there's a lot of gated communities actually, where you can only get in if you know somebody and the guards who have shotguns know that you know somebody, or if they just know you and know that you live there. And I lived in one of those places, so we paid 1,500 quetzales a month. We lived above a member who rented to us, and they were awesome, wonderful family. That is really common, that members will have like an extra apartment and they'll rent it out to the missionaries. It's like 7.5, 7 to 7.5, depending on the day, basically. That would be $1.